everybody, this is AJ, you're with the Mighty Glue Stick channel with a new microphone. I hope it sounds better. And today we're going to be going deep underwater into, well, mostly actually shallow water. And we're going to be covering an aquatic race called the Merfolk. Originally, back in the day, they first appeared in 1975's Blackmore supplement, where they were known as mermen. They became Merfolk all the way in 3rd edition in 2000. And the 3.5 revised monster manual in 2003. But yeah, they appeared in 1977 in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and 1991, 1981, 1983 with the rules cyclopedias, monster manual for 2nd edition, 1989 and 1993. So they've been around for a long time. So essentially, they are. They've got a humanoid upper body, arms and head of a fair-featured human, although they are fey-looking, so quite often they'll have an elven sort of aspect to them, with swept-back ears and more aquiline sort of nose and arched eyebrows and eyes that are sort of elliptical on their faces. But that's mainly due to adaptations to their water home, because they travel through water, which is quite a resistant medium, so they need to be streamlined. And they do swim face first, so their heads, they are often depicted with hair, but they may have fins or spines with frills and things, which can move, so they can become upright and splayed out, or sweep them back on their head. And this is quite often a way that they will communicate their emotional state or state of alarm, or whether they're feeling proud or regal or angry. They may sort of puff out these frills to emphasize their words and gestures. They do speak Aquan and Common, and they are amphibious. They can travel on the land and the sea, or any waterway, and can travel in quite shallow water actually, just sort of sliding along and making their way through. But they prefer to occupy shallow, fairly warm waters, where they have light in the upper depths of whatever body of water they're in. They don't tend to like going into the dark, deep depths, and they can go to very deep depths of water. Possibly not to the very bottom of the sea, but certainly a lot deeper than a mammal can. So they are they're medium sized. They're about 8 foot long from the top of their heads to the end of their tail. They weigh about 400 pounds, because that tail adds as much mass to their body as their upper body does. It's much heavier than the legs of a terrestrial humanoid would be. Their body is quite muscular, lithe, but very strong. They've listed as having a strength of 10, a dexterity of 13, constitution of 12, intelligence of 11, wisdom of 11, and charisma of 12. So they're very much like people of the sea. They travel at a speed of 10 feet on the land, and they are capable of protecting themselves from the ground. They don't tend to dry out that much, because if they're going into the land, they will dress accordingly with clothing and things like layers of stuff which is soaked and gooey, which keeps them moist, and also protect themselves from being scraped and dinged up by the hard and sharp ground that they're travelling across. But they are fairly tough. I mean, they've got an armour class of 11, so in and of themselves their skin is thicker and more resilient than a human skin. For those of you who have ever been scuba diving and things like that, the sea is full of sharp things, and you do tend to get scraped up and things if you're not too careful. Particularly if you're moving around coral reefs. And the Merfolk do live and propagate heavy amounts of coral and seaweed and sea life. They farm the sea, so they keep sea creatures around themselves like pets, like livestock, and to protect themselves and to be used as beasts of war. So that's one of the more sort of dangerous aspects of Merfolk, even more so than landfolk, who rely on cavalry and things like that. They have creatures in the sea that make war elephants and such look tiddly by comparison. They're capable of summoning leviathans to take out shipfuls of people who are pestering them, and are quite capable of sacking coastal communities with gigantic creatures, riding sharks, flying manta rays, and all sorts of other fantastical beasts into war. However, they don't tend to be very warlike. They're quite a peaceful people, and they usually have a neutral sort of alignment. They don't really care what happens to the people of the land. They have 11 hit points, 2d8 plus 2 hit dice. They've got plus 2 to perception, passive perception of 12. They don't have dark vision, so when they're travelling into dark waters or things like that, they need to take along bioluminescent sea life, which they keep in jars and things like that. They're not capable of forging metal, and really anything other than, say, copper or gold is useless to them because it just corrodes in the sea anyway. And so they tend to carve shells, have stone or coral implements that they've grown specifically. So they're capable of wielding spears and tridents, and they're listed as having a spear with a melee or ranged attack, plus 2 to hit, 5 feet melee range, or they can throw out close range of 20 feet or 60 feet long range to hit one target for 3 points of piercing damage, or a 1d6 roll, or if they're holding it with 2 hands and thrusting, it does 1d8 for 4 points of damage on average. And that's about it. They've got a challenge rating of 1/8, again as a humanoidish civilized race. Their danger lies in their ability to cooperate with each other and attack in groups. And a large amount of them that are throwing spears at you and also using carnivorous fish, predatory sea creatures to harass you, stinging jellyfish, giant clams and things like that, beds of giant clams which trap you and clamp down on your foot, and then they just send in porpoises and things like that to thump into the side of you and break your ribs. They can quickly subdue anybody who decides to go into their subterranean terrain uninvited. They have settlements all over the place. Usually the sea dominates whatever fantasy world you're setting your game in, but shallow seas are fairly restricted. They would tend to like, I guess the best terrain that they could have would be a sunken volcano caldera, so like an atoll which is sunk below the ground, below the sea surface. So you've got a large area with a sort of a hollowed out shallow in the middle, which is an old crater, with a mild seawall, and basically it supports a large amount of marine life and quite substantial coral. And they would have passages and things which lead into quite a sheltered area, so they're protected from the worst of hurricanes and tropical storms. And they build up basically burrows and houses for themselves. But if they gather together for any particular length of time, they're going to grow sort of more almost Greek style buildings and things. They don't have to worry about rain or that sort of thing, so their structures are generally quite open, and really it's just containing areas where they do certain things to keep the wildlife out, to demarcate areas where things should remain where they are, or places of interest or landmarks of importance where people meet and do things, laboratories, that sort of thing, places where they keep creatures where they're birthing their young, and that sort of stuff, hospitals, libraries, that sort of thing. They do have the ability to carve language and things, although they can't keep books or anything like that, or scrolls. They don't have leather or things. They tend to just weave fibres that they find, or use shells or stone, and they have columns and plinths and daises and thrones and that sort of thing. Obviously they eat seafood. They tend to eat shellfish and any sort of, they have an omnivorous sort of appetite, and they eat all sorts of marine plant life and fish and mollusks and things like that. They don't tend to want to have anything to do with the landfolk. As long as they are left alone, they're quite happy to leave everybody else alone. But occasionally there is conflicts when landfolk disturb sea life or take more than they should, or are releasing poisons into waterways, which are disrupting the merfolk way of life. And there are, of course, lots of tales of merfolk who fall in love with mariners, sailors who see them in the depths and fall in love with mermaids and things like that. There are, of course, they have, as they're an intelligent species, they have the ability to learn magic and have the capacity to become adventurers in their own right. The sea is as rich with different types of merfolk communities, so they have different races of their own, and they've got a rich and storied history of their own, which I'm not privy to because there's not a lot of lore that I can sort of access on it. The Merrow, on the other hand, are merfolk who got taken and corrupted by demonic hellish activity, so they're a natural enemy. Also the Sahorgan are a natural enemy of the merfolk. They do have their own gods. They and the Locatha, which is another species, worship Iadro, who is a aquatic god that quite often takes on the form of like a large water elemental, but is capable of taking on the shape of Locatha, a merman, an amorphous blob, or basically anything it pleases. And in particular cases where Locatha's people are threatened, it may appear, or an avatar may appear and destroy whatever is threatening the community. Iadro is a member of the but those who have their being in the sea or are haunted by the true dream, whatever that means in Elven. And other members of that include Deep Sarchelis and Iadro, Persana, Sermonaire, Serenita, Trishina, and the Water Lion. And yeah, so they've got a relationship with elven gods. I'm not sure quite how that works out. If you ever meet a merfolk, you can ask them. So yeah, that's them. Just bear in mind they are a humanoid species, and they have a civilization of their own. Their artistic aesthetics and things like that are quite different from a land person. So they see crabs and octopi and things as beautiful. So Cthulhu to them would be not a horrific thing. It would be fairly attractive as far as they're concerned. Yeah, they have a different view on things. Their artwork is swirling and sweeping, and yeah, they have their entire environment is fluid and moving all of the time. And life is everywhere. They have shrimp and krill and octopi and jellyfish, and they make sounds with bubbles and that sort of thing. So their world is their music and art and poetry and their sculptures and things like that are swirling and spiraling and sweeping like seashells and coral, and with splays of colour that blend in nicely to their environment. But they love to decorate their homes with living things. So sea anemones and sponges and all that sort of stuff make up the artwork of their home. Their street signs and things are just collections of living things. Yeah, so that's Merfolk for you.